Greetings, namaste. Welcome to our Living Wisely, Living Well webinar. My name is Nayaswami Devarshi. Let's begin with a prayer. Heavenly Father, greetings, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswarji, beloved Guru, Paramahansa Yoganandaji, saints of all religions, we humbly bow at thy feet. Divine Mother, teach us how to rise above all moods, all griefs, all sorrows. Help us to always be free in thy joy and thy light, in thy inspiration. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Each week we have a reading from Swami Kriyanandaji's book, Living Wisely, Living Well. And today's reading is from June 19. And it's about overcoming moods, griefs, and sorrows. Very good topic. Moods, griefs, and sorrows of every kind cannot be reasoned away. They have their own reality in their own magnetic attraction. The only way to cure them is to change your level of awareness. When I was young, I used to drive moods and sorrow away by concentrating. Once I did so very fiercely at the point between the eyebrows. This reading is very important lesson and teaching, which is that we cannot think our way out of moods, griefs, sorrows. We cannot think our way out of delusion. We have to change our level of awareness, as Swamiji says, our level of energy. And we also have to understand the root cause of moods and sorrows and sadness, which I'll get into in a minute, especially moods. All of these things, moods, grief, sorrow, they are originated on the level of feeling and not of reason. So we cannot reason our way out of this. We have to work with feeling. And the way we work with that feeling, one of the ways that Swamiji describes here, is by lifting our level of energy up the astral spine, as the science of yoga teaches us, to the point between the eyebrows. And that changes our level of awareness. And it lifts our level of energy up to a place where there are no more negative thoughts and negative feelings and moods and suffering. Really, Paramahansa Yoganandaji said that thoughts are universally and not individually rooted. So all thoughts of sadness, of moods, this person did that, this and that, they are on the level of feeling. Yoganandaji said reason follows feeling. And so we cannot change on the level of reason. We have to change on the level of feeling and on the level of awareness. And this is really the science of yoga, works with all of this. The whole science of yoga, the reason that it works is because it works on lifting up downward pulled feelings, offering them up and lifting them up, offering them up, bringing the energy up here from down here. And that is really, in essence, the science of yoga. Every yoga practice that is effective in some way influences, either directly or indirectly, the energy in our astral spine. And it causes that energy to withdraw inwardly and rise upwards to the point between the eyebrows, to the divine, essentially. And everything that we practice in yoga, all the techniques, all the practices, in some way, they work with that energy. Whether it's meditation, where we concentrate here, or devotion, where we offer our heart's love and energy up the spine to the point between the eyebrows. Even the most basic aspects of the yoga science, having a straight spine, shoulders back, chest out, it lifts the energy up. And you'll see this when you're depressed, when you're sad, Your spine tends to bend down and you tend to look downwards and you sort of shuffle around in sort of a low awareness and low energy state. When we feel inspired and uplifted, even that phrase, uplifted, the energy is rising up and we have a straight spine and we tend to look up. And so the science of yoga, you can look at just these two very simple things and then apply it to all the different yoga postures, breathing exercises, inward practices like Kriya Yoga and meditation techniques. They all work in very similar ways to these two simple things. One, having a straight spine. You'll see this if you're feeling sad or heavy or depressed. If you suddenly just straighten your spine up and get really straight, you'll find that your energy level increases and you actually feel better. The other one, simply looking upwards. This is why we look up to the point between the eyebrows when we meditate, because where our eyes go, it draws our energy in that direction. And if we are gazing upwards, it lifts the energy upwards. If we're looking down all the time with our shoulders slumped, our spine bent, but looking down, the energy goes down. And the eyes, you'll see, when a yogi or a saint, or when we go into superconsciousness, the eyes automatically look up. When we're in the conscious alert state, the eyes are looking straight ahead. When we're subconscious, the eyes tend to go down. And so where we place the eyes, it draws the energy in that direction. And so all of the science of yoga, it's actually very practical. People make it too sort of vague and mystical and even superstitious with some of the practices. You know, you do something haphazardly, just do the mantra and it produces some magic effect. But it only produces an effect to the extent that you do it with awareness, concentration, and energy. So all of these practices of yoga, breathing exercises, mantra, yoga postures, they all work only to the extent that we do them with awareness, with energy, with feeling. And so this is the science of yoga and why it is so effective at changing our consciousness. Moods in particular, Yoganandaji described moods as part of just the waves of duality. I'll read a reading from him where he says that moods especially are caused by past overindulgence in sense pleasures. And what he was saying in that is this, that moods are part of duality. And when we get caught in the waves of duality, we experience great pleasure, and we'll always have to experience the exact opposite, a mood, sorrow, suffering, as the energy goes down to balance the outward up. In the way Yoganandaji talked about this, he said it's like the waves on the top of the ocean. And those people and us, when we have done this in the past, I hope we're not doing this too much now, but when we indulge really strongly and heavily in a sense pleasure, the energy in a very outward way goes high, just like a wave on the ocean. But it's going to have an equal and opposite trough, a downward part of the ocean. And so the waves on the surface of the ocean go way up and go way down. But when we start calming our mind and living more from our center and no longer indulging in either moods or sense pleasures, because even moods, people indulge in moods, let's face it. Analyze yourself, watch others, and you'll see that some people, they like being in a mood and they feed it and they indulge it and they try to rationalize why they should be in a mood and support the idea, because they like the ups and the downs and the ups and the downs and sort of the roller coaster ride. A roller coaster would not be very much fun if it just went flat for most people. If it just went straight along, it would just be kind of boring. It would just be basically like a train. But people think that in order to experience life to its fullest, they must have these huge ups and these huge downs. But after a while meaning, 40 million lifetimes of doing this, Yoganandaji, the way he put it, he said that you just finally realize the anguishing monotony of living that way, because it's up and down, up and down. You do this for millions of lifetimes, and you realize that this is really, really boring, in fact, even though it seems outwardly exciting and dramatic and all this. And you see people who live very dramatic lives. They're going up and down and up and down, and the extremes always balance each other out. And where the yogi lives is in the depths of the ocean, where it's very calm, very still. And this is where you go beyond duality. And it's not a dull state. It's not a subconscious state where the yogis go. It's a superconscious state. And this is where divine joy, why that really is the goal that all are seeking. Because divine joy is unconditional, it's beyond duality. You can experience divine bliss no matter what the outward circumstances are. And so the yogi, our job as yogis, is to, as Yoganandaji said, remain even-minded and cheerful. When a mood comes, don't give into it. Raise the energy. Because even a mood, when we indulge in it and get into it and kind of go through it and just kind of say, oh, I'm feeling bad and this is why, it's also going to have to go back to the upward swing and then the downward swing and up and down. And so try to live in God. When a mood comes, lift the energy up, offer the feeling of that mood to God. When we experience pleasure eating an ice cream cone or a good food, gulab jamun or something, share that with God too, rather than kind of just losing ourselves in the pleasure and just getting overly greedy. The yogi doesn't suppress these things and just deny the senses, but when we experience something pleasurable, do it from a center. Don't get too excited, but also just give it to God, share it with God. Whatever pleasure, even the most indulging pleasures that may, be delusional in a way because they're so downward pulling. But even that, if you share it with God, what happens is things start to come back to a center over time. This is the way Yoganandaji put it. And Swami Kriyanandaji, his disciple, spent a lot of time with his guru and wrote down a lot of his words and his advice. And here he talks about moods. Swamiji writes, "A certain disciple often suffered from moods. 'Why do I have them?' she asked the master. 'Moods are caused,' he replied, 'by past overindulgence in sense pleasures. They are the consequence of over-satiety and disgust. Don't give in to them.' Frequently, he advised people, 'If you indulge in moods, they will reawaken your past desire for their opposite pleasures. Thus, they will pull you down into delusion again.'" That is really fascinating. I've never heard anyone ever say this before. And Yoganandaji was a master. He knew if you indulge in moods, they will reawaken your past desire for their opposite pleasure. So don't indulge in moods. One might ask, why would indulging in moods reawaken the very desires that caused one to suffer in the first place? The answer, the master explained, is that life manifests the principle of duality. It is like a pendulum, swinging unceasingly, as he put it, back and forth between opposite states of awareness. The farther the pendulum swings in one direction, the farther it must swing back in the other. Indulgence in moods returns a person, with or without his consent, to their opposite pleasures. That's a fascinating statement. To stop that unending to and fro movement, the secret is to resist it, as a child does who wants to get off of a swing. I remember this on a swing set as a child. You would pull the ropes of the swing back and forth opposite to the direction it was going to bring it to a dead stop and get off. In this case, the master said, the solution is to preserve a mental non-attachment. When a child wants to get off a swing, he stops it by resisting both the forward and the backward movements. The same is true for the pendulum swing of life. Resist inwardly the pleasure you feel in anything. Resist also the sadness life brings you in consequence. Strive to be even-minded in all that happens so that nothing touches you inwardly. This doesn't mean to allow nothing to please you, to become apathetic. Simply realize that whatever pleasures you enjoy are in yourself, not in the outward sensations. Your pleasure that way will actually be all the greater. This is one of the most amazing advices that we can live by. This is in the book, Conversations with Yogananda. Really, if you don't have that book, that one and another that Swamiji wrote that's similar called The Essence of Self-Realization, everyone must have that book if you are a disciple of Yoganandaji in this path. There's just so much wisdom in those two books. So moods, sense pleasures, all these things, they work more on the level of feeling and desire, not on the level of reason. And so we have to understand that delusion catches us more on the level of feeling. Again, Yoganandaji said, reason follows feeling. And you see this, that you'll be in an argument with someone or a discussion, hopefully, rather than an argument, and you'll be discussing something, and they're so stuck on their position that it's completely illogical, but their feeling is on that side of the position. This only happens to other people. It never happens to us, of course. But if you analyze yourself and introspect, you'll see that we all do this to some degree. We argue something. Our reasoning follows feeling. We've already decided something inwardly. Then we try to find some reason to justify it. That happens very often. So we must work and change on the level of feeling. And so work with calming the feeling, the waves of feeling. This is just using this analogy again of the ocean waves or the pendulum swinging back and forth. The whole science of yoga begins with Patanjali saying yogas chitta vritti nirodh, which is yoga is the neutralizing and the calming of the waves of feeling of the heart. And again, like Master said, it's not making yourself apathetic and dull. It's just resisting that swing or causing the waves to start to even out and going deep underneath the waves into the ocean of divine bliss, which is not conditioned by the ups and downs and by duality. It's only one. And you have to understand that divine bliss also, it is a feeling. One time Swami Kriyanandaji was being interviewed and he was asked, what is God? And he said, God is feeling. That's just an amazing definition of God. God is feeling. It's not an idea. It's not some big cosmic thing. God is feeling. And then of course he said, and that feeling is Sat Chit Anandam, ever existing, ever conscious, ever new bliss. That is what God is. And this is Yoganandaji, Sri Yukteswarji, in Autobiography of a Yogi. They said the same thing. Sri Yukteswarji said, ever new joy, this bliss is God. And so the answer also, just like delusion traps us on the level of desire and feeling, so also the answer is on the level of feeling. And this is divine feeling. The love of the heart for God, the divine bliss, which is also a feeling. These are the two feeling aspects of the divine that show us the way out. And so work with feeling, work with joy, work with enthusiasm, work with inspiration as the answer to all moods, all sense pleasures, all other desires. Because once we start to have this desire for God, then all other desires start falling away. And once we just taste divine bliss, just once in a deep way, you will find that nothing compares to it. And even if you lose that feeling, as if God just gave you a taste of it, maybe due to past samskars and past spiritual effort, and then it goes away, you remember it. And then when you indulge in sense pleasures and moods, in some ways the pain is actually worse because you remember divine bliss. And so the prod to going for freedom is even stronger because it's more anguishing yet. The anguishing monotony becomes even more anguishing once we just remember that experience of divine bliss. Now I'm going to read a couple of the other readings the next 2 days, just because they touch on this exact topic. For tomorrow, Swamiji writes, Heartbreak can be overcome by offering oneself to God. In our realm of duality, life inflicts countless disappointments on everyone. Perfect bliss awaits you only in God. Accept pain as a corrective to mistaken directions in your life. If you live wholeheartedly for God, pain will keep you on the straight path that leads to Him. This is a very unusual way of explaining pain, is just almost a gift or a blessing from God. And really what pain is, it's a guide from God. It's to help us. If you touch a hot stove with your hand, you get burnt and you feel pain. And that pain is given to us as a very positive tool to protect us from losing our hand by having it burnt up in a fire. And so that pain is actually a very good thing by pointing us in the right direction to go in our lives. In this case, it's to take our hand away from that hot plate or the hot fire. But also, when we experience any pain, grief, sorrow in our life, analyze it and see, what is God trying to tell me with this? Where is He trying to point me? And, I more and more keep it simple rather than overanalyzing it and trying to find some, 200 lifetimes ago, I did such and such, and this is why. And people go to psychics and find out all this crazy stuff that may or may not be true. I keep it very simple. If I experience pain, suffering, sorrow, I've learned now and I understand that the only reason I am suffering is because I don't have divine bliss. And I remember that bliss, I know it, but when I experience pain and suffering, the reason why I suffer and the reason why I feel pain is because the difference between what I'm going through and experiencing in divine bliss, that distance, that vast gulf between the two, that's the pain, that's the suffering, and that's why. And so I just take it as a prod, go to God, go back to God, try to find that source of perfect feeling, of perfect bliss, which is the only answer to all suffering, grief, sadness, and moods. I'm going to play a recording of Swami Kriyanandaji. It's a song, many of his songs were really written to tune into divine joy and to overcome sadness and sorrow, not by reasoning, but by offering ourselves into the light, by having positive attitudes, affirmations. And this is a song this recording is from probably almost 50 years ago, 45 years ago. The song is called Come Gather Round.
Come gather round, we'll sing the blues away. Dawn now is breaking, and the mountains say, it's only light can make the darkness run. Lift up your head, greet the rising sun. Greet the rising sun. Some people think to harvest happiness by weeding troubles, easing every stress. The trouble is that troubles never end. Get rid of one and you face its friend. And you face its friend. It's in your heart, the songs of joy resound. You'll hear but echoes in the world around. Wind on a hill sounds lonely if you're sad, free if you're free, cheerful if you're glad. Cheerful if you're glad. come with me. We'll chant of battles won, shots not of anger. Joy will be our gun. Before the light, the veils of sorrow rend in ecstasy. All delusions end. All delusions end.
That last line, before the light, the veils of sorrow rend. In ecstasy, all delusions end. And yes, all suffering, all moods, all grief, all sadness. I would just highly recommend listening to Swamiji's music because they share these divine truths in a way that don't reach us just on the level of reasoning, but also on the level of feeling. Because music, poetry, a voice that of someone who has realized God conveys vibration and feeling. And so just hearing that line again and again, I'm so thrilled by that song. In ecstasy, all delusions end. And the way to get there is before the light, the veils of sorrow rend. All delusion ends by offering ourselves into that light. I'll read one more the following day, June 21st. Direct every sorrow upward from your heart to the Christ center between the eyebrows. The more determinedly you raise your consciousness from your heart, the closer you will come to understanding this eternal truth. Grief is a delusion born of egoic separation from the true self, God. And just the song again, the answer is to look up towards the light, is how this song begins. And that's the answer to all our problems, all our griefs, all our sorrows. And he's saying in a poetic way of offering the heart's feelings up to the light. And so take any grief, any sadness, any sorrow, give them to God, give them to the Guru, give them to Divine Mother in meditation, in prayer. Share your heartache with them. Talk to them. Yoganandaji said, blame them for your suffering because they put us into this situation. So this is the answer to all grief, all sadness, all suffering. It's the only answer, is to go back to God. And there are many ways to do this. The whole of the Bhagavad Gita describes all these countless ways, all these yogas. Karma yoga, bhakti yoga. And again, just how I began this talk here this evening. The science of yoga is designed to help us work with changing our awareness, changing our level of energy, helping us to withdraw the life force away from being caught in duality and desire and attachment, and bringing it up the spine to the spiritual eye. That's the science of it. But on a feeling level, what we essentially are doing is offering ourselves, our love to God. And this is how the beauty of the science of yoga, it even explains devotion and devotional chanting, because these are things, they're practices, but they have the effect, again, of taking the feelings of the heart that are caught in these waves of duality, suffering, sadness, and moods, and offering them to the Lord, where they are purified, where they are calmed, where they are transmuted from human feeling that's caught in duality into divine feeling, which is divine bliss and divine love, for which there is no up or down. It's one, it's pure, and it's really divine union with God in those divine aspects of feeling, divine bliss and love. So follow these teachings of yoga, meditation, devotion, self-offering, working with this energy, and you will find yourself becoming more and more free, more and more joyful, even blissful over time. May the light and the grace of the Masters and Divine Mother free us from all of these delusions and from all suffering, ultimately in their divine bliss. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.